I'm Nicole Davidson from Nicole Davidson Negotiation. These are my top tips to improve your mediation outcomes. Over the past 5 years, I've seen many clients in mediation, some with legal representation, some self-represented. I've observed behaviours that assist in achieving an outcome and those that make it a near impossible task. Based on that experience, here's my top tips for your preparation and behaviour at a mediation. Tip 1 is prepare yourself. Preparing a brief overview of the dispute for the mediator not only helps them prepare for the mediation day, but ensures that you've identified any areas where you might need to do a little bit more thinking for yourself. A preliminary conference with the mediator can also be a good way of identifying any gaps in information which may get in the way of reaching a settlement. I find that often lawyers prefer not to hold these or don't include their clients in the discussion at that point. While this is often justified on the basis of saving clients additional costs, the reality is that these costs can play an important part in making sure that the overall costs of the mediation aren't wasted. If you are going to have a lawyer present at the mediation, it's important to ensure that you're both on the same page. I've seen lawyers blindsided by a client who changes their stance the morning of the mediation, or a lawyer who suddenly gets really argumentative and positional at the beginning of the mediation as a negotiation strategy, but hasn't identified with their client that they're going to take that approach. The more that you and your lawyer communicate, the more effective the mediation will be. Tip number 2 is be honest. There's a fine line between puffing and lying. Mediations are negotiations, and it's important to highlight the strengths of your case. But too much lying or stretching the truth can make not only the other party, but also the mediator skeptical of your position. While mediators strive to be impartial, they're also human. Their ability to push one side or both sides of the dispute may be affected by their perception of the case, and your stretching of the truth may change their perception. Tip number 3 is listen. You are always going to hear things that you don't want to hear at a mediation. The mediator's goal is to help you reach a compromise. They can't do that without exposing bad facts or weak arguments. That's not to say you should run away from a fight. You shouldn't let yourself be bullied, and you should question what you're hearing, but it's not helpful for anyone for you to dig your heels in and stop listening just because you don't agree with what's being said, or you feel that the mediator is saying things that are favourable to the other party. They may just be repeating what the other party said so that the other party feels heard. Tip number 4 is be patient. Effective mediations can take longer than you expect, and you may have multiple impasses through the process. You'll inevitably feel at some point that this won't work or we'll never find a middle ground. Believe in the process. Lulls and setbacks are normal. And although it can be uncomfortable, it is part of where you need to go to get to an outcome. Also remember that negotiations require mental breaks. It's important to take a break to give yourself time to regroup and strategize if you need to. And don't be afraid to ask your mediator for that time. Also remember that not every mediation has to settle. I've been to a number of mediations where, despite the best efforts of the parties, settlement hasn't been achieved on the day. A lot of these settle shortly thereafter as the negotiations continue. And in other cases, there are just very good reasons why settlement doesn't make sense. So don't feel that a failure to achieve a settlement is a failure of the mediation. My final tip is to document things. Once you've spent all of this time achieving an outcome and both parties have reached agreement, you might find that you're very tired and you really just want to get out of there for the day and come back and document things later. Be careful before you do that. There are 2 key risks. One is that as you go through the drafting process, there will be small details that come up, and in the process of the mediation, parties will be really geared towards getting this finalised, and they'll be able to negotiate through some of those small process discussions probably more easily than if they're doing it down the track. The other thing, of course, is that if you don't have a signed agreement before you leave the mediation room, there's a real risk that the other party might change their mind and all the work that you've done at mediation becomes wasted because they refuse to sign a document. So those are my top 5 tips for getting the most out of your mediation. If you've got any questions, I'd love to answer them. So please do reach out. Other than that, thanks for watching.